What's going on? REKBCQ signing on for another episode of Rex Room. This is going to be a somewhat different format than traditional Rec Room videos. This will be more of a character study style video. This may hint at possible plot points for what the characters could go through, but will focus more on the personalities of the characters. For this video, we will focus on 3 characters in particular. These will be the children of Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka. We're exploring the next generation, the Gohans, the Borutos, to a lesser extent. The children that will take the mantle of the protagonist from their parents and predecessors. These characters are named Toshinori Midoriya, nicknamed Toshi, Amai Midoriya, and Kaze Midoriya. I'm going to clarify now that I will not be going in order of when they were born. They were listed off before from oldest to youngest, being Toshi, Amai, then Kaze. However, I want to save Amai for last, since I think she will be interesting with how I'm handling her character, so stay tuned for that. One last thing before we get into the thick of things. This video will contain spoilers for the most recent season of My Hero Academia. At the time of recording, that is Season 5. First off, we got Toshi. The firstborn of the Midoriya family, he was named Toshinori after Deku's predecessor, master, and idol. In order to differentiate from All Might, he goes by Toshi. A kind and caring soul, he also has a bit of a rebellious streak, not unlike his father, and can be overconfident at times, which his mother blames on his uncle Kachan. While usually for the greater good, he often ignores his elders and superiors in favor of his own agenda. While he is very caring about the ones he loves, he does have a bit of a hard time showing affection to others, with the exception of his direct family. He's a lot more chill than Bakugo, and doesn't have as much of an ego, but he is still a bit out there sometimes. Unlike his father, Toshi was born with a quirk. This quirk, like with most characters in MHA, plays well into his personality. Toshi's quirk is called firebending, based on Toshi's favorite childhood show. A mixture of his grandparents' and mother's quirks, he breathes fire and can manipulate it in various ways. Not only can he move it to follow targets, he can shape it into different things as well. He can make barriers, fire whips, and even platforms. Unlike other fire-based quirks, he can interact with it as if it was a solid object. This does not work with anyone but him, though. Some of the drawbacks of the quirk is that the farther away the fire moves from his body, the less control he has over it. As well, as with a lot of fire-based quirks, he can only withstand so much fire until he starts overheating. Lastly, he gets sick if he uses too much fire at once. This in particular can be trained over time. Also, as a little flavor to it, the flames are green. Due to Toshi's quirk, he has gone to train with some of his parents' friends. Todoroki and Bakugo were called in by Deku to help Toshi control his quirk. When Toshi first unlocked his quirk, he did almost burn the house down. First, Deku sulked after finding out quirks just skipped a generation in his family. After that, Deku and Ochako figured he should probably get some training. That's where they realized that Toshi could actually manipulate the fire. The 2 teachers were instrumental in making sure Toshi understood his quirk. Todoroki, which Toshi calls Uncle Shoto, was obviously brought in due to his fire-based quirk. Bakugo, however, was brought on due to his quirk being known for its mobility. Over time, they realized that Toshi could hypothetically fly with this quirk. Similar to Tokoyami with Dark Shadow, he rides on his fire to fly, which he gets faster with every day. Since Bakugo's quirk is very mobile, Deku and Ochako thought he would be the best person to teach Toshi. These 2 mentors are attributed as to why Toshi has a hard time showing affection. After all, neither of them are necessarily known for being outwardly sentimental. The 3 are pretty close due to their training, though, and Toshi is best friends with Todoroki's son, who we will cover at a later date. Toshi is about to start his 3rd year at UA. He's been focusing hard on making sure he shows he's a competent hero on his own. It's a bit ironic because he has taken a ridiculous amount of inspiration from other heroes, but he hasn't processed that really. He wants to show that he isn't riding off the coattails of his father. He has put in the work and is just as strong. It's even to the point that he told his father that he'd never want to inherit One for All, no matter what. As a small side note, It is most likely that Deku will not give one for all to any of his children anyways. There are multiple reasons amongst the 3 kids as to why that is, but one reason in particular I will not mention in this video. It currently hasn't been mentioned in the anime, so I will hold off on saying why. I figured I'd at least mention it in case any manga readers noticed I left it out. I see you, I get you. Moving on from Toshi, we are now switching from the firstborn to the baby of the family, Kaze. For those who are interested, Kaze is a pun based on his parents' names. Midoriya roughly translates to Green Valley, Uraraka can be translated as a glorious spring day. Take those 2 translations together and you get a beautiful image. Taking from that, I thought of some of the calming elements of being in a green valley on a spring day. I came up with a breeze, went to Google Translate, then got Kaze. I don't have a canon reason as for why Deku and Ochako named him that. Maybe they thought of the same thing I did, or maybe they just thought it sounded nice. As for Kaze himself, he's quite a rare case, especially at the time he was born. He's quirkless. Over time, quirkless people are becoming more of a rarity. This was the case even when Deku was a kid. At that point, roughly 80% of people had a quirk of some sort. That percentage has only increased since then. Surprisingly, he is not really upset by that. From a young age, Kaze was a smart kid. Like Deku, he is always taking notes about everything around him. He took a particular interest in the science of quirks. Beyond combat potential, which Deku focused on, Kaze wanted to know about how the quirks functioned. For instance, he paid attention to heroes like Bakugo. Bakugo generates nitroglycerin-like sweat on his hands that causes the explosions. Kaze would ask Bakugo questions like, how do you ignite the sweat you generate? And why can't you make explosions happen on other parts of your body, despite being able to generate sweat there too? He wanted to know everything down to the minuscule detail. Bakugo has now transferred his nerd nickname from Deku to Kaze. Then there are his older siblings, who also have very technical quirks. Out of the 3 siblings, Kaze and Amai have a particularly strong bond. Amai was always the big sister type, so she gave him as much attention as she could. They were always really supportive of each other too. Amai would listen to Kaze's ramblings about his research, while Kaze would help her out with training and be a shoulder to cry on. Kaze also ended up taking a lot of interest in Momo Yaoyorozu, which he calls Miss Momo. Kaze absolutely loves her. Since they are both really smart, they get along extremely well. Originally, he was just really interested in how her quirk worked, considering that hers is so technically involved. However, he just ended up talking to her about anything, both science-related and not. Momo also finds the Miss Momo thing adorable, thinking it's much more flattering than something like Mrs. Todoroki. Todoroki isn't a big fan of his, though. He's totally convinced that Kaze has a crush on Momo. Momo constantly uses that to tease Todoroki. Kaze does too, refusing to say whether he does or doesn't have a crush on her. Kaze's interest in quirks goes beyond fascination. He uses this information to develop support items. It directly plays into his dreams. He has 2 in particular. For one, he is well versed in the quirk singularity theory. Despite only being a middle school student, about to enter his 2nd year, his goal is to use his knowledge of quirks and support items to help people control their quirks. Figuring that quirks are already at a very powerful level, he wants to develop support items that can help people use their quirks in a safe manner. Items in a similar vein to Aoyama's belt for his naval laser. Secondly, he has been developing technology to mimic quirks as well. He believes that if he can develop his technology to a certain level, he can become a hero without even having a quirk. That's a lesser focus since it will not help as many people, but he's allowed to be a bit self-indulgent, right? Lastly, Kaze could be considered a child prodigy. At his young age, he is already working as an intern for Deku and Ochako's support item provider, Hatsume. Now, last but not least, we have the middle child, Amai. Out of all of her siblings, she's the one who takes most after their mother. She's a kind, sweet, wholesome individual that cares about her friends and family more than anything. She is very social and very goofy, though it should be said that she can be very awkward. I'd say she has both her mother and father's awkward energy combined. One part of her personality, which will be covered more when we cover her quirk, is that she is kind of a gym rat. Like Deku, she works out a lot. As for her name, as it was with Kaze, it's a play on her parents' names. Specifically, it plays off of her mother with her new name, Ochako Midoriya. The Ocha in Ochako and the Midori in Midoriya translate to tea and green respectively. Green tea. I wanted to play off that too. I didn't want to pull from another tea, since something like matcha just was awkward to me. Instead, I went for different aspects of tea, which led me to sweetness. Translate sweet into Japanese and we get Amai. It fits with her personality as well. She's one of the sweetest people ever. With that out of the way, we get to the part of the character that is the most exciting. That is her quirk. She might have a sweet exterior, but she is not a pushover by any means. Part of that comes from her quirk, being called pressure. This is a clear mixture of her grandmother's quirk, Inko Midoriya, and her mother's quirk. Like her grandmother, she can manipulate objects. However, unlike her, Amai has full telekinetic control of these objects. She can make them weightless and move wherever she wants. However, there is a catch to this. The weight of the object is put on her instead. While it's not one-to-one, it can be really intense when she carries a lot of weight. For those of you who have seen Dragon Ball, imagine it like the gravity training room. For every object she adds, the harsher the gravity becomes for her. Luckily, she only feels roughly half the weight of it, making it easier for her to carry more. It's because of her quirk that she goes to the gym so often. She works out her whole body in order to increase the amount of weight she can carry. Her quirk helps with that. The weight of the item is evenly dispersed through her body. Because of that, she can work out her entire body at once. It's fun to watch, too. Imagine a girl sitting next to multiple floating barbells. Eventually, they are lightly put back on their racks and the girl drops to the floor exhausted. Lastly, I do realize that this is similar to Reiko Yanagi's poltergeist quirk from Class B, but I had forgotten about that when conceptualizing this quirk. Who knows? Maybe she'll have a role in the story at some point. Well, now that I've explained the first quirk she has, and yes, I said first, we can get to the next part. This idea was inspired by a YouTuber named Turtlequirk. In one of his videos, he talks about his interpretation of the next generation. The daughter of Ochako and Deku in his version had gotten a second ability, which is what I'm exploring here. It will likely be different from his, but let's get into that. To put it plain and simply, she has inherited a version of One for All. Right now, it is unclear as to whether such a thing is possible. Out of all the users of One for All, only All Might's master, Nana Shimura, has been shown to have a child. However, it is unclear as to whether he was conceived while she had One for All, so he might not even be a good example. For the sake of making an interesting story, we are going to say that it is possible. Keep in mind that this isn't One for All itself. Deku still has that for the time being. This quirk, while not legally registered yet, has been deemed heirloom. Right now, it is unclear as to whether heirloom itself can be passed on, but the aspect of the quirk that is most relevant to Amai is the accumulation of power. Like One for All, the quirk gets stronger over time. This applies to her as well. Unlike the average human, her ability to build up power is amplified. To put it in simple terms, the gain she gets from increasing her strength is twice as much as normal. As you can imagine, this plays into her quirk greatly. On her own, she probably wouldn't be able to carry much weight. With this secondary quirk, her abilities are heightened to a major degree. While she only manifested this quirk recently, it will lead to her being able to lift far more weight than she could have otherwise. One last thing about heirloom. This may seem like it's going to make her gain so many new abilities. It won't. This essentially served as a reset button. She isn't going to be able to manifest Black Whip or any other quirks that the vestiges of One for All had. It will only improve her physical strength. As for her place in the story, she will be a first year at UA. While she doesn't have aspirations of becoming the #1 hero like her father, she does want to be a good enough hero to make her family proud. She wants to save people. If that gets her high up in the ranks as a hero, fine. All she cares about is the lives of others. She'll be a key figure in the plot of this story since she is in the same class as the protagonist. Unlike something like Boruto, I don't want to put the focus solely on her. She will be a key player, sure, but I think it makes sense to put the focus on the next holder of One for All. However, you won't be hearing about them here. I want to save that for its own in-depth video. Plus, I haven't written or designed the character yet. They'll probably be saved for last. But lastly, before I end off the video, I thought it would be fun to discuss the designs of Toshi and Amai's costume. I won't cover Kaze since he's only in middle school at the moment. Because of that, he has no suit. Maybe in a later video. First off, Toshi. As you may have noticed, some aspects of his costume resemble those of other heroes. That would be because his main inspirations were his three mentors, Bakugo, Todoroki, and of course his father. I'm sure you can figure out what aspects belong to which heroes. He took inspiration from his mentors in more ways too. You may have noticed that Toshi is shown with red eyes, despite neither of his parents having red eyes. That's because they're contacts. His eyes are actually brown. He used those contacts to make his eyes resemble Bakugo's. As for the mask and red streak in his hair, that comes from Todoroki. Toshi thought that Todoroki's two hair colors and eye scar were cool, so he dyed a streak of his hair and put the mask in the same place as Todoroki's scar. Deku and Ochako desperately tried to explain that mimicking the scar was incredibly insensitive, but Todoroki thought it was strangely flattering, so Toshi kept it anyway. One last part of his costumes are the fans on his chest. Since his quirk deals with fire, he tried accounting for it in a way that you don't really see with fire-based heroes. He had a cooling system installed inside of his suit, specifically designed by his little brother. While it only works to a certain extent, both Endeavor and Todoroki were floored by this. For days after, they would constantly wonder, how did we not think of that? As for Amai, her costume is a bit simpler. She takes design cues from her mother's costume, as well as using both pink and green, pulling from both of her parents' costumes. Unlike Ochako, she intentionally had her costume be more form-fitting. She wanted her costume to function more like workout clothing. Since she is very athletic herself, she appreciates the extra mobility. She also has more functional aspects as well. The black around her wrists, calves, and neck aren't just braces. They are weights. Because of her reliance on strength, she uses them to train even outside the gym. They don't weigh her down either. Since her quirk alleviates the weight, she can switch from carrying the weight on her body to using her quirk. That lets her remove the weights at will, as well as use them as weapons against villains. This also applies to the dumbbells attached to her belt, giving her countless possibilities for defense and offense. Plus, if she wants, she can just punch. With that, I have told you all about these three characters. I had a lot of fun writing and designing them, and I hope that comes through. Like I hinted at earlier, I'm thinking of making this into a series as well. I want to cover more children of the My Hero cast, as well as possible characters beyond that. Develop a full sequel to the series. I'll focus more on the characters than a full story, but I will throw in tidbits of it. I'll use that to inform what the characters will be like. Maybe if this gets some traction, I'll explore what the plot could be like in its own video. But along with this is releasing in tandem with another thing I've been working on. I've been posting Izuocha comics on Reddit, under the name REKC Official. That is REKC_BCQ_official. No capitalization. I will be posting a comic involving the two and one of the children alongside this. A link will be in the description. So, if you like this pairing, check it out. Lastly, did you like all these characters? How do you think the kids of the greatest heroes would be? Should I learn not to be so detailed with my descriptions? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and click that bell to see more videos from us. I have plenty of video ideas in the works. The other face of the VCQ has some as well. Check it out. Have a wonderful day. This is REKBCQ signing off.